You're listening to The Moose on the Loose, your 10 minutes action-packed financial podcast with your host, Mike Yahoo. Hey, what's up, Market Moose? This is Mike from The Moose on the Loose. I hope you are doing well this Thursday. Man, the week flew fast. Well, I guess this is what's happening when you are pretty busy, right? So today is my last day on this small series on real estate. So on Tuesday, we talked about is a house an asset or not. So I pretty much came with the conclusion that it's a asset of a lower quality because yes, it forces you to save and it grows in value over time, but it is cash flow negative, so it doesn't generate anything, and that's not ideal, right? So you want to invest in rental properties, you want to invest in the stock market or in your own business, or as for your career, you can invest in your own skills. So investing in those will generate cash flow down the road. And those are most valuable assets than a house, in my opinion. Then yesterday we talked about renting versus buying with minimal payments. So this is exactly what I'm doing right now. Eventually, in the next few years, I'm going to probably shift over because the business is doing well, and then I'll have enough cash flow to do both, grow my investment and pay down my debt. But at this stage, I rather enjoy life, and that's a personal choice. It's not a mathematical choice. And this is often what happens when you think about finance and personal finance in general. We say that it's personal finance because there's the math part of it, and there's also the personal part of it. So how do you deal with that with your emotion? So I don't mind having a mortgage, and I just love to enjoy life right now. So I rather A, invest in the business, B, travel with my children and my wife and spend a lot of time with them. And that is a lot more important for me than having like $5 million at retirement. Long story short, I don't know how it's going to happen in the future, but in the meantime, this is how I want to enjoy life. And today, we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about how about paying down your mortgage as fast as possible versus investing in the market. We're also going to discuss what happens if you have an inheritance, or if you have like cash on the side. What should you do? Should you do a lump sum payment on your mortgage, or should you invest in the stock market? So there are obviously two ways to look at it. The first way is the mathematical way. And this is usually where I start when I want to know what is the best financial decision. In my case, I'm more like a rational person when it comes down with numbers. I see numbers like really as what they are. I don't see the money. I don't see the value. I don't have really the psychological impact. I would just look at the numbers. And just to show you, when I was a financial planner, I was dealing with investors that were doing well. But most of the time they were not millionaire or close to be millionaire, but like $1.5 million invested. That was pretty much it. And then when I became a private banker, that's another league. So now all my clients had more than $1 million to invest. Some of them had like 10 millions. Some of them had like 50. And I even had a client that his net worth was above, like it was like in the hundreds of millions of dollars, just to give you an idea. And then sometimes people were saying, yeah, Mike, aren't you freaked out about that? I mean, that's crazy. You just like inked a deal and now you're going to invest like $15 million. And I'm like, you know what? 15 million or $150,000, it's exactly the same thing. It's all that much, like that's everything that guy has. And the other client that I had back then that had 150, that's all he had as well. So he cared just as much. And then you're just adding zeros and it's just numbers. So when you go on math about paying down your mortgage or investing in the stock market, it's the same thing. So it comes down to your asset allocation and your strategy. So if you invest in mostly bonds and GICs, generating about 5% yield right now, and over a long period of time, you should not even count on that 5%. Probably would be safer to expect 3%. Well, if your interest rate is like 4, 5, 6% right now on your mortgage, the idea is pretty obvious. You should definitely pay down your mortgage, and mathematically, you're going to be well off. Plus, you have also to consider taxes. Of course, if you invest in an RSP, you're going to get a tax return, but imagine that you had that money and you invest it in a taxable account. So that return of 5% is fully taxable. It's added to your revenue, while when you're paying down a debt at 5% or 6%, that is a guaranteed return net of taxes. The downside of paying down your mortgage, that money doesn't compound. So the difference between investing in the stock market and paying down your debt is when you invest in the stock market, you invest $100 at 5%. The next year it's 105, and then it's 105 that will grow at 5%. So you're going to get a little bit more than 5% return the second year, and then it's going to grow over time. When you pay down a debt, you make on the first year that 5-6% return because you're saving on interest payment, but after that it's over. It does not compound. So you also have to consider that. So when everything is equal, so you pay 5% interest rate and then you invest at 5%, well, if it's guaranteed, I would probably go for the investment. But most of the time, the second factor that you have to consider is when you talk about investing, it's expected return. And expected is not guaranteed. So if you mostly invest in equities, well, then your expected return should be somewhere 5, 6, maybe 7%. Anything over 7% is gravy, and you should not consider it as like part of a plan. And even personally, I plan at like 6.87, 7%. Anything between 6.5 and 7% would be realistic for 100% focused, a portfolio 100% focused on stocks. Of course, when I look at my returns over the past 5, 10, 15 years, 20 years, because I've been investing since 2003, so I have a little bit more than 20 years now under my belt. Well, over that past 20 years, I did a lot more than 7% annualized return, but that's just gravy. It's just the market. Maybe the next 10 years will be lower. So over time, that's what's going to happen. So knowing the difference between a sure shot of like paying down a debt at 5, 6%, and expecting making 6, 7, and the life of a 7% portfolio return is plus 15, minus 2, plus 5, plus 20, minus 10. That's eventually going to come up to plus 7%, but it's never 6%, 8%, 7%, 7.2, 6.8. So you get a picture. It's not stable. It's going to fluctuate highly. So there's that emotional impact you have to consider. Like, do you feel well at night knowing that you have a large sum amount owed to the bank, or you would rather have a large sum amount invested in the stock market? Mathematically speaking, again, the key is the difference between the net of taxes return versus the net of taxes interest rate that you pay. Now that interest rates are higher, probably that for most people, it's better off to pay down their debt first and then consider investing. The thing that you do, though, is that if you pay your mortgage very fast, then you should probably focus on taking the same amount of money and put that into an investment account later on, just to create that snowball. You pay off a debt, you have more money that is free up in your budget, and you direct most of that money towards investing. And this is how you can build net worth rapidly. And on top of the mathematical point of view, there's also one last thing I would like to say is if you go to retirement, or if you lose your job before retirement and your house is paid off, that is definitely a financial burden you don't have to deal with. And it's a huge one. You know that like money discussion is probably like the number one cause of arguments in a couple, and probably one of them, like if not the biggest cause of separation. So you really have to be careful with money, and sometimes just taking that stress off the table will just not bring like stress off the table, but will also improve your love life, improve your personal life, and eventually it's not a bad decision. You know, like living in a debt-free house is always a good thing, but having a lot of money invested is also a good thing. So you have to consider both. On my side, that's why I always go back to that rationality to say, okay, so what is making more money right now for me? Is it the investment market, or is it paying down my mortgage? All right, Moose, I hope that you have enjoyed this small real estate series. If you have any other questions or any other ideas about quick series like this, you can hit me on Twitter. You can reach me by email on moosemarkets.com. There's a contact info over there. You can, if you subscribe to my newsletter, of course, you just have to reply to any email that I send on a Friday morning, and I'll be making sure that I do some research for you and I pull out some podcast episodes. All right, Moose, that's enough for today. Tomorrow it's Business Friday, and until then, don't forget to stay invested. Hey, welcome to the disclaimer. If you're listening to The Moose on the Loose, you cannot really expect me to give you buy or sell recommendation or financial advice, right? You're here for fun, you're here for information and some entertainment. But I am not your financial advisor, I am not your broker, so therefore I'm not liable if you're losing money after listening to the podcast. If you're looking for some advice, go see a professional. If not, you can enjoy the show and do your due diligence after it.